137 meters long, 23 meters wide, 13 meters high. These were not suggestions. They were not vague metaphors. These were coordinates. Build yourself an ark. When the Creator spoke these words to Noah, he wasn't just commissioning a boat. He was commissioning a capsule, a biological archive, a wooden womb designed to float above the death of an entire planet. The Bible gives us the raw data, the dimensions, the material, the purpose. But have you ever stopped to consider the terrifying reality of the execution? To transform a divine command into a physical reality, Noah had to become the greatest engineer of the ancient world. He had no cranes, no hydraulic systems, no Bitumen. History books tell us about the pyramids or the Colossus of Rhodes, but before them all, there was the Ark. Today, we are going to deconstruct the most famous vessel in human history. We will look beyond the Sunday school stories. We will consult the book of Genesis, but also the ancient shadows of the book of Enoch and the book of to understand the terror, the technology, and the absolute madness of building a floating city in a world that had never seen rain. This is not just how the Ark was built. This is how the world was saved. To understand the engineering, we must first understand the environment. The world of Noah was not our world. It was the antediluvian earth, a place of terrifying biological and spiritual corruption. The book of Enoch describes this era as one where the Watcher's fallen angels had descended, corrupting the genetic and moral fabric of humanity. The earth was filled with violence, and the blood of the Nephilim. The giants stained the soil. God's instruction was surgical because the threat was total. But the first challenge Noah faced wasn't the wood. It was the terrain. A structure of 137 meters longer than a football field, higher than a 4-story building, cannot simply be placed on the grass. The sheer tonnage of the timber alone would sink into soft earth. The Bible, in Genesis 2:6, gives us a crucial geological clue. A mist went up from the earth and watered the whole face of the ground. There was no rain. The hydrological cycle was different. The moisture came from below. This meant the ground was perpetually damp, perhaps marshy. If Noah laid the keel on wet soil, the wood would rot before the first wall was raised. Tools would sink. The foundation would be unstable. Before he cut a single tree, Noah had to become a civil engineer. He likely had to dig drainage channels, diversion trenches to bleed the moisture away from the construction site. Imagine the scene. A man, seemingly crazy, digging trenches in a world that didn't believe in judgment. The book of Jasher, a text mentioned in the Bible itself, suggests that this construction took decades and that Noah was constantly mocked. "Why are you preparing this land?" they asked. Noah didn't answer with logic. He answered with obedience. He wasn't building for the weather they saw. He was building for the catastrophe God knew. Make yourself an ark of gopher wood. Scholars debate what gopher wood was, but most consensus points to cypress. These are not modest trees. They are titan pines, resistant to rot, dense, and incredibly heavy. Felling a single tree of this magnitude with bronze or iron tools, perhaps, utilizing the metallurgy skills of the line of Tubal-Cain, required immense physical strength. But moving them, it required genius. Without wheels as we know them for heavy transport, Noah likely used the roller method. Same technique used to build the ziggurats of Mesopotamia. Trunk over trunk. Leva over leva. The text says Noah and his sons, whose foreman, or did he hire labor? The Midrash suggests Noah might have hired giants or local men who worked for coin, unaware they were building their own tomb. But ultimately, the vision belonged to one man. The backbone of any ship is the keel. To span 137 meters, no single tree is long enough. This implies Noah had to master the art of scarf joints, interlocking wooden connections, reinforced with hardwood pegs, that created a beam stronger than a single log. These was high-precision carpentry. If the keel was off by a degree, the stress of the ocean would snap the ark in half. Then came the ribs, the frame. As the skeleton rose against the pale, mist-covered sky, It must have looked alien to the onlookers. A cathedral of wood in a godless world. But a skeleton is not a ship. It needs skin, and it needs to be watertight. God's command was specific. Cover it inside and out with pitch bitumen. Asphalt. This is a profound detail. In the ancient Near East, bitumen was a precious resource, used to mortar the bricks of the Tower of Babel. It requires heating, boiling, and applying while scalding hot. Noah wasn't just a carpenter. He was a chemist. He had to process tons of this black resin, coating every inch of the wood. Why? Inside and out. Because the water wasn't just coming from the sky. It would be pressing from the deep. Once the pitch hardened, the wood was no longer organic. It was encased, hermetically sealed. The Hebrew word for cover here is Interestingly, it is the same root word for kapor atonement, to cover sin. The pitch didn't just keep the water out. It symbolized the protection of God covering the fragility of man. The exterior was a fortress. The interior had to be a biosphere. The Bible commands, "Make rooms in the ark." The Hebrew word kinnem means nests. This wasn't an open cargo hold. It was a honeycomb of engineering. 3 decks. This structural choice was crucial for stability, a concept naval architects call the center of gravity. The lower deck, for the heaviest biome, elephants, hippos, dinosaurs, if we consider the young of large reptiles. Keeping the weight low prevented the ark from capsizing in high waves. The middle deck, for medium animals, provisions, and perhaps the humans. The upper deck, for birds, lighter animals, and ventilation. And here, we face the logistical nightmare that skeptics love to attack. Waste in air. How do thousands of animals survive inside a sealed box without suffocating? Genesis 6:16 mentions a window, Sahar finished to a cubit from the top. Some rabbinic traditions, specifically in the Sanhedrin tractate of the Talmud, suggest the Sahar was a luminous stone or a crystal that refracted light. But architecturally, it likely refers to a continuous ventilation system running under the roof overhang. Noah likely utilized the stack effect. Warm air from animal body heat greases, exiting the top, which pulls fresh, cool air in from the sides. As for waste, sloped floors, gravity-fed gutters leading to the lower hull, perhaps ejected through moon pools or simple dumping ports. God gave the dimensions, but he gave Noah the brain to solve the logistics. Take with you food for you and for them. This was the first supermarket in history. Hay, grains, dried fruits. The ark was a floating silo. As the final plank was nailed and the final jar stored, Noah faced the most vulnerable part of the ship, the door. There was only one entrance, not 2, not 3. 1. Theologically, this is absolute. There is only one way to safety. And then, the impossible happened. They didn't have to be hunted. They didn't have to be trapped. The Book of Jubilees implies that God stripped the animals of their natural aggression for this specific time, a supernatural sedation. They came in pairs, driven by an instinct, rewritten by the Creator. Imagine the terror of the onlookers. The mockers fell silent. The ground shook not with an earthquake, but with the march of the animal kingdom. Noah, his wife, his 3 sons, Shem, Ham, Japheth, and their wives, 8 souls. Souls stepped inside. And then, Genesis 7:16 records one of the most chilling lines in Scripture, and the Lord shut him in. Noah built the door, but he didn't close it. The mechanism was too massive, or perhaps the moment was too final for human hands. God sealed the timeline. The age of grace was over. The age of judgment had begun. Silence. Inside, the smell of pine, pitch, and straw. Outside, the world continued for 7 more days. This is the week of grace. The pause before the drop. Imagine the psychology of those inside, waiting, listening. Did they doubt? Then, the 600th year of Noah's life, We think of the flood as rain, but the Bible is more violent. All the fountains of the great deep burst forth. This wasn't just a storm, it was a tectonic deconstruction. The hydroplate theory suggests that massive subterranean aquifers exploded under pressure. The crust of the earth shattered. And then, the windows of heaven were opened for people who had likely never seen rain. This was alien. The screams outside were soon drowned out by the roar of water. The ark, built on dry land, felt the first lift. The wood groaned. The joints, those scarf joints Noah spent years perfecting, were tested. It lifted. It floated. Inside, the sensory deprivation must have been maddening. The ark had no helm, no sails, no rudder. Think about that. Noah had no control over the destination. A ship without a rudder is a statement of absolute surrender. God, you steer. For 150 days, the waters prevailed. This means total aquatic dominance. Every mountain, every high place, covered the world of the Nephilim, the cities of Cain, the technology of the Watcher Seerest, crushed under millions of tons of pressure. Inside, life became a rhythm of service. Feeding, cleaning, sleeping, praying. A monastery amidst a holocaust, and God remembered Noah. The waters receded. The ark came to rest in the mountains of Ararat. But the air was silent, a dead silence. Noah opens the window. He sends a Ravana scavenger. It flies back and forth, feeding on the floating carrion of the old world. Then he sends a dove, a symbol of peace, looking for life. The olive leaf, evidence that the earth had resurrected. When the door finally opened, it wasn't just a disembarking. It was a rebirth. Noah stepped onto a planet that had been washed clean. The geography was different. The atmosphere was different. What was the first thing he did? He didn't build a house. He didn't plant a field. He built an altar. Genesis 8:20. He took the clean animals, the extra ones. He had brought and offered a burnt offering. Why? Because survival is not a right. It is a gift. The first act of the new humanity was an act of worship, and God responded with a rainbow. The keshet. In Hebrew, keshet means war bow. But look at the shape. A bow points its arrow upwards or away. God hung his war bow in the clouds, unstrung, pointing away from the earth. It was a treaty. Never again. The story of the ark is not a fairy tale about a boat in a zoo. It is a terrifying, beautiful archetype of salvation. The ark represents a safe space amidst chaos. The pitch represents the atonement that covers our cracks. The dole represents the singular opportunity for rescue. History tells us that civilizations rise and fall. The geological record speaks of catastrophes. But the message of the ark remains: when the world falls apart, when the logic of man fails, and when the floodwaters rise, there is always a shelter for those who listen to the whisper of God over the shouting of the crowd. Noah was considered a fool for 100 years, but for eternity, he is known as the man who survived. If you want to understand what happened to the bloodlines of the Nephilim, or where the sons of Noah dispersed to create the nations of the modern world, click the video to the right. The history of humanity is just beginning.